Lewis here with Status Coup. I am joined today with Claudia Zapata, who is the nominee for Texas 21, the Democratic nominee here in Texas. Thank you so much for taking the time. First off, I really appreciate it. If you want to just start off, you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got involved in this race to start with.
Yeah, so I am an original Austinite. So grew up in Austin, yet around the age of 9, my grandfather was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and I have a very, very close-knit Tejano type of family. Mm-hmm. And so my mother made the decision for us to move to deep South Texas. So I grew up in a border town, so 956 RGB represent. And I grew up after that on a rancho in the middle of Mission, Texas. And that's where I think I really discovered that a lot of the issues that I saw and that I faced were because of bad policy. Mm-hmm. Or I wouldn't even say bad policy, but the lack thereof. Mm-hmm. And my entire life, I've always known that I've wanted to be of service to others. But as I've gotten older, each obstacle that I've faced, each issue that I've seen my family members come in contact with as well, I'm always thinking like, geez, if we had good representation that provided good policy solutions, then we would be able to have a better quality of life. And so that's what drove me to run for office, is family and friends, seeing their struggles and wanting to empower them. Mm-hmm. And I worked at the Texas legislature as well, so I'm familiar with policy development. I did an internship with the Annette Strauss Institute, so nonpartisan type of understanding of policy and being able to reiterate that to the public as well. And then the last 4 years, I worked at the Texas Health and Human Services Commission as a budget and workforce analyst. And I think that that really sealed the deal, because if you work in state government, you kind of know like, oh, this isn't the best place to work. It's pretty sad because really you only get the resources that are handed to you. However, growing up working class, I pretty much already know how to do that, right? I know how to do a whole lot with a whole little. So I'm excited to be in this race.
Absolutely. No, that sounds great. So just for folks, we've got a little bit more of a national audience, although a lot of them are here in Texas. Mm-hmm. Do you want to just give folks an idea of what the makeup of Texas 21 is like? Just to give folks an idea.
Yeah, so the 21st Congressional District runs from Austin, southwest Austin, mm-hmm. to northeast San Antonio. Mm-hmm. Then comes all the way up around the beautiful Texas Hill Country. Mm-hmm. That's the best way to explain it to the audience, is that I am running for a district that encapsulates all of that beauty. Mm-hmm. So it goes out to the Frio Rio, comes back up to Kerrville, Fredericksburg, Dripping Springs, and then wraps all the way back around.
Gotcha. Nice. One of those fun, lots of weird fingers to all of the districts here in Texas.
Yes,
with all the gerrymandering.
Exactly. And I was about to say, even with redistricting, it really changed. They changed it, I would say, enough, not shape-wise, but mm-hmm. enough demographic-wise, mm-hmm. in terms of the amount of red areas that they expanded and grew. Mm-hmm. Because it used to go all the way up into like West Austin, so like UT campus area.
Gotcha.
And they completely took all of that out, therefore making it a much safer red seat.
Right, and we'll get to him later, but just for the viewers as well, this seat is currently held by Congressman Chip Roy. I've got some questions on that later, so we don't need to go down to that rabbit hole quite yet. So as you've been campaigning in your district here, what are kind of the top issues that you're hearing from voters that they're most focused on when kind of making their decisions here moving into the midterms?
Yes, so I would say first and foremost, environmental issues. It is so important that we're able to discern the different reasons why people from along the political spectrum are coming to the table, because we have small business owners who are genuinely conservative individuals. However, they understand that the constant pumping of water is impacting their winery. It's also impacting the fact that the hill country is driven on tourism. So the more that you degrade the environment, the more that you are hurting their pockets and hurting their livelihood. So we have small business owners who are conservative that are coming to the table to talk about environmental issues regarding that. However, we also have those that are on the lefter side of the political spectrum who just care about the environment, right? Just care about the world that we live in. And we have a lot of issues with constant growth and development. So right now we're in Hayes County, which was deemed the fastest growing county in the nation, according to the 2020 census.
Wow, okay.
For example, in Wimberley, we have exponential growth, so much growth that Wimberley is running out of water. However, because there are large parts of it outside of that city area that are unincorporated, you have companies being able to come in and build these huge developments without the thought of having to account for, well, where are we going to get the water?
Right.
And I've met with so many folks from not just Wimberley, but all the way down to Real County, who have said, I can't build any more wells on my property because there's just no more water. So we have environmental issues are huge, especially water here.
And that's fairly unique, I would say, too, to especially, obviously, like, more of the environmental issues are definitely more of a left-leaning cause in a lot of cases. But it's interesting to hear that a lot of the conservative farmers, business owners, there are a lot of wineries in the hill country as well. Recognize that that's a major issue. Not even recognize it. I mean, it's a environmental issue, and it could very much turn into an economical issue for them as well. Yeah.
So if anyone that lives in the hill country is thinking about running for office, just run on environmental issues alone, and I guarantee you will win.
There you go.
Another issue that kind of goes alongside that I mentioned in terms of development are short-term rentals.
Okay.
So because it's the hill country that's driven by tourism, we have companies like Airbnb, Vrbo, that are coming in, just these private companies that are coming in and purchasing all of the homes and putting them up for, short-term rental.
Right.
Which means that a lot of the workforce that we have in the hill country does not live in the hill country.
Right.
We have people who drive in from other parts of the district to come work in the hill country because they actually can't afford to live there.
Right.
And so it is a huge issue, especially when you drive around to any of these towns, whether it's Fredericksburg or Kerrville or Ingram, or even at this point, Bernie, you have a lot of homes that are just sitting empty.
Gotcha.
And it's like we have so many people that need homes that would love to be homeowners. And we need to be able to fight that. So, I mean, even in Fredericksburg, which is a pretty conservative area, just recently they passed a city ordinance to ban private companies from continuing to purchase homes to make them short-term rentals.
Right.
And so there are ways to go about introducing rather left ideas into the hill country because it affects everyone.
Right.
I would say lastly, the final issue, which is I would say not really a issue specific, but it's this idea of really partisan politics. People are beyond over the rhetoric that unfortunately the Democratic Party and Republican Party uses in fear-mongering and thinking that just not being the other guy is good enough.
Right.
And people are just so tired of it.
Absolutely. I'll get to that right now just because you mentioned it, and then I do want to jump back to some of the housing and environmental issues as well. But yeah, we are seeing right now lots on both sides of the aisle. Number one, everything is being pushed to hate each other, be against each other. Like you're either way on this side or way on this side, and there's no middle ground anywhere. And in some cases, that's totally justifiable. But in a lot of cases, I mean, we're just seeing a stalemate on everything, and we're also seeing lots of hypocrisy amongst a lot of our leaders. One of the issues right now that's kind of been in the news with the, in the last, it's probably been a month or so ago now, but it's going to be coming up again here, unfortunately, is on the issue of abortion. And that is an issue, obviously that's very important, and I'll give you an opportunity to kind of state where you are on that, but that we're also seeing a lot of hypocrisy on as well. I mean, we here in South Texas, as I'm sure you're aware, there was just the race with Jessica Cisneros versus Henry Cuellar. In that race, we saw the highest establishment Democrats coming in and backing Cuellar, who is one of the last anti-abortion, or the last anti-abortion Democrat in the House of Representatives, and he had the endorsement of Nancy Pelosi, who recorded robocalls for him. We had Jim Clyburn down there actually out campaigning for him. Steny Hoyer endorsed him. This is, not so bad as an endorsement, but I ran into Congressman Lloyd Doggett at a pro-choice rally in Austin, and I asked him about this race in particular, and he told me that he wouldn't get involved. I pressed him why he wouldn't make an endorsement. He dodged the question. He kind of said, oh, I know who I would vote for. And now, unfortunately, it looks like Jessica's going to lose that race by 200 votes. I mean, the fact that the Progressive Caucus in Congress wasn't getting involved, the fact that some of them did, but the whole caucus as a whole, the fact that Nancy Pelosi is endorsing against Cisneros, and at the same time, these people are fundraising on the issue of abortion. I mean, these sorts of things, like, they're even driving their own base mad on some of it, and there's plenty of issues on the Republican side as well. I mean, I'm just curious your thoughts on some of these things that are happening at the highest levels of government.
I was wondering if that was you that did the Lloyd Doggett.
That was me.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So just for a little context, I started off running in TX35. And that was before redistricting, before Congressman Doggett had decided to move districts. So just thank you for that. But I want to make it very clear, I support a pregnant person's right to choose. And abortion care is health care. I will stand by that. The reasoning, whatnot, I don't care. It's none of my opinion, right? It does not matter.
Fair.
I really do. It was really sad to see in the Cisneros campaign. It was really sad to see the fact that we did have Democratic leadership coming out and repping for Henry Cuellar. I also think that had the Progressive Caucus, the House Progressive Caucus, stepped in and helped out in South Texas. Here's the other thing, is that we need to understand that progressives exist everywhere, not just within urban city centers. And much of their work was focused on San Antonio and picking up votes in San Antonio. However, the areas in which the campaign lost were those closer to the border. And I know, being from the border, I know that there are tons of progressives that are out there that are also probably feeling just so overlooked, right? Overlooked for these larger urban areas. And so I think, there's like a twofold to this. One, it didn't help that we had leadership coming out and supporting an anti-choice Democrat. And then it didn't help that we had no one really focusing on South Texas. And not just Laredo, but everything else in between. A lot of those smaller areas got overlooked. And
it is an area that Republicans seem to be focusing heavily on right now. I mean, we just saw Mayra Flores just won her race, and it's
TX34.
And it's a, correct me if I'm wrong, but that includes a lot of the Rio Grande Valley, and it's a similar demographic of folks down there. It's just that the Republicans knew that this was potentially an area that they could invest in, and they invested heavily, and they sent, they had their folks get involved, and the Democrats seem to not be doing that in a lot of cases.
No, I mean, I definitely agree in the sense that, like I said, when I grew up in the Valley, there was just lack of presence, period. So it makes sense to me why we are losing these seats, why we aren't progressing forward, because I'm like, the only time that I've heard people even talk about the Valley as of recent is when we lose seats, or is when a Republican that's super pro-Trump wins. And so it makes sense to me why we're losing the Valley. Investment is crucial.
Right.
Even if you think the race is unwinnable, even if you think it's in a very safe, red, conservative space that you should not be wasting resources on,
Right.
you need to make the investment.
Right.
But back on the subject of abortion, I have been driving home, at least within the 21st Congressional District, that being pro-choice means supporting a person's right to have an abortion, but it also means that it supports a person's right to become a parent, right? To have a child. And I think that we are so lost on consistently talking just about 50% of the equation, which is abortion, that we forget that we need to talk about what happens to people who are forced to give birth, right? Which we need to talk about maternal and infant health care. We have in Texas, we have extraordinarily high rates of maternal and infant mortality here in Texas. Within my congressional district, as of right now, we have 2 hospitals, both on the southern edge in Austin and in San Antonio, both on the edges of the district. So we have individuals, for example, I was knocking on some doors out near Fredericksburg in Stonewall, and I spoke with a woman who said that when she gave birth, when her water broke, she had to drive 2.5 hours into Southwest Austin in order to give birth.
Yep.
Imagine how many times a person has been placed in that situation and then something goes awry.
Right.
And the closest emergency hospital is 2 hours away.
Yeah, no, that's insane, and we'll make sure to put a map up so folks can tell. But this is a big district. Like this is not like a small little section you can drive to the whole thing in an hour. The fact that there are 2 hospitals in it, even if they were in the middle, is probably not enough.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
and so I really am stressing on throughout every conversation that I have with folks is, yes, we need to talk about abortion and abortion care, and it needs to be present, right? It should not be taken away. That right should not be taken away. But we also need to talk about what can we do to revamp the amount of help that we provide people who do want to have kids, right? Who do want to, because the more that we focus on one half of the conversation, we're losing out on an entire base who would be supportive of us increasing the amount of help that we provide soon to be parents.
Yep.
And one of those examples would be, for example, the formula shortage that we have. I've met with a few nonprofits here in the district, and I was very, very point blank about the fact that I know that we have a lack of presence here, just infrastructure, period. And infrastructure means grocery stores, it means hospitals, it means pediatric clinics, it means doctors' offices. I know that we have a lack of those items here in the district. And when we talk about grocery stores and hospitals, it's not like they only serve, a particular political identity, right? They serve everyone. And I have been very, very clear with folks that all of the things that I support help everyone, regardless if they see me as a commie or Democrat, regardless of any of that. I'm like, you still should have a right to a pediatric clinic, right? You should still have a right to health care, and not just insurance, because that does not solve the equation here in rural Texas. We need to actually have preventative and routine health care available for folks here.
Absolutely. I want to change the topic to another issue and then kind of do one kind of broad encompassing thing from there. So obviously a couple weeks ago we had the terrible tragedy in Uvalde. I was fortunate or unfortunate to be there very quickly after it happened. I was actually on my way down to Laredo to cover the Cisneros race when it happened, and I got the call that it happened, and we headed over to Uvalde to speak with residents, and it was I can't put into words how terrible it was to be outside of the Civic Center as families were inevitably finding out that their child may be the one or one of the many who unfortunately passed during that. I see on your website you talk about safe gun ownership.
Yes.
I'm curious if you want to outline your policy a little bit more there about what does that look like to you? Yeah. Go ahead.
So And I don't want to say that, oh, I'm a Texan, so this is applicable to all Texans. But I mean, I grew up around guns. I grew up going to shooting ranges. The first time I shot a gun, I was 11. All of my friends all went hunting. They all had guns. I mean, even throughout high school and whatnot. However, never in my personal experience has anyone who practiced safe gun ownership shot up a school. And I think that's why I'm so set on the fact that we need to practice safe gun ownership. You know, we have our Second Amendment right, fully believe that, fully support that. But the way that we protect our Second Amendment right is by upholding the standard on which it takes to use it.
Gotcha.
So the more that you have individuals who aren't practicing safe gun ownership, the more that you have individuals who are abusing the laws as they exist, the more it hurts someone's right to own their guns, right? It hurts their right to the Second Amendment. And so we need to figure out, well, the shooter in Uvalde, he didn't break any laws.
Right.
When he went about obtaining the gun. So that means that he abused a lawful system in order to do something unlawful. So we need to do everything that we can to raise the standard then, right? So for example, I support red flag laws. I support mandatory waiting periods. This might be a little bit more controversial, but I don't necessarily, and I'm still trying to figure out where I fall on it, but banning of assault weapons, still trying to figure out exactly where I fall on it. I'm leaning more towards the fact that I feel realistically a good compromise and meet in the middle would be just requiring special license, right? Requiring a special license in order to own an assault rifle. Because the fact of the matter is that we will continue to be in a stalemate if we are set hard on only getting this one thing done, right? However, if there are means to be able to make some sort of progress, even if it's small incremental baby steps, I think it's so important that we do so. So hopefully that clarifies what I mean by safe gun ownership is the conversation that we need to be having.
Absolutely. Kind of a quick question here. So in the Texas legislature, the makeup of that is obviously very Republican. Do we think that you're going to see any changes to gun laws coming here soon? I know that there is some discussion about it, but I'm just curious your take on if you think anything will happen within the state on this.
This is the part where I break the wall. No.
Okay.
No. Frankly, if the Texas Democratic Party and its leadership and Bethel, if they don't start actually caring about the candidates that are running for state ledge, we are not going to have any sort of movement. Bethel may do extremely well. However, that does not mean that that goes the same for all down ballot candidates. And I still have not seen the type of resources and help that need to be given to our state ledge candidates in order to make this type of policy possible.
And I think a lot of folks, see Beto and he's able to get fundraising from the outside and things like that. Obviously him getting elected is still an uphill battle as far as the demographics of Texas still go. There is definitely more of a chance now than I think there ever has been, but that's my opinion. You can only do so much as a governor if you don't have control over the Senate or the House.
Exactly.
So it's, you can elect Beto as many times as you want. He's not going to be able to change any laws unless you are able to win some of those down ballot elections. So that is important. Absolutely. So now we've kind of covered abortion and guns right now nationally are the big things that I think a lot of folks are who are like into the weeds of politics, who are frustrated that they're not seeing any action on. Is this something that, and we're seeing lots of hypocrisy, as I mentioned, right? I mean, even at the national level where Democrats do have control of the House, they do have control of the presidency, and they narrowly have control of the Senate with Vice President Harris as the tiebreaker vote. right now, all of these folks. I'm getting fundraising emails. I'm subscribed to all sorts of candidates to just see what they're putting out there, and a lot of the Democrats are fundraising on vote to protect abortion rights, vote to strengthen gun laws. Even the most optimistic polling that are like from insider Democrats, they're very likely going to go into 2022 by losing seats. To keep control of both chambers of Congress would be a rarity. Do you think that now is the time to act on these sorts of things, and that President Biden needs to really be using the bully pulpit and kind of up the ante on Senators Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin, and say, hey, now is the time. We're going to get rid of the filibuster, and we're going to pass these things into law.
Yes, end the filibuster. Completely supportive of that. It's time. It is time. I also think it's good to also understand that we are losing races. We lost TX34. We lost TX28 because we are nationalizing our policies. And let me be very, very clear. We have to expand our base. If these issues, which have been present for years, these aren't the first time that abortion and guns come up, right, during campaign season, and yet that still hasn't managed to grow the base. So why do we continue to nationalize our policies and focus on these things when it obviously has not worked, right? When obviously that is not the driving factor to encourage people to join the base, right? To cast their vote. We need to focus on local politics. All politics is local. That is why, unlike a lot of my counterparts who are running for U.S. Congress, I don't nationalize anything. I talk about what's going on in the district. National politics doesn't always apply to the area that you're running.
A lot of it is not real life. I mean, I'm sure lots of folks are rightfully concerned about the issue of abortion and the issue of guns, but they're very much more likely to be concerned about, like, holy shit, gas is almost $5 a gallon in Texas, like, let alone in California or anywhere else.
Exactly. Or holy shit, I don't have any water.
Yeah.
Or like, holy shit, there's another cement plant going up across from me, and I'm breathing all of that in, and I have like stage 3 lung cancer, and there's no hospital near me. These are the issues that are important to folks where they're at. And so we need to be better about getting that message across, that we need to stop over-nationalizing our politics. And I refuse to do so. Because at the end of the day, campaigns are about winning, Like, and it doesn't matter how much money you raise, does not matter how much people outside of your district love you. You cannot do the good that you want to do if you do not win.
A couple quick questions last for you, if that's okay. I know I'm taking some time. Okay. I want to talk about Chip Roy a little bit. I'm sure some folks are familiar with Chip Roy, who is the current congressman in Texas 21. Recently, he made some news, and I saw you had mentioned it on Twitter, and I want to read it specifically here. So this week, Congressman Chip Roy said that women in the military, quote, cause the standards to be reduced. He then continued to say, speaking about his colleagues in the GOP who support this measure, that, quote, these Republicans are from bright red states, and this is what we get. In the face of open borders, inflation, mandatory jabs, and crime, these clowns draft women. I'm just curious what your take on those comments are, and on what he's talking about with this new measure that's being discussed.
Okay. So I woke up and I was like, Chip, it's too early for this. It's too early for this, Chip. I come from a family of people who served in the armed forces, and I'm a family of, like, throughout 3 generations, we're mostly women. Knowing that he was speaking and saying that women lowered the standards of our military, of our armed forces. Yeah, I'm like, Chip, did you serve? Like, oh, did you go out there? Did you go through boot camp? Sir, could you pass the test? Like, let me ask you that question. Could you pass the test? Pissed me off. I have a cousin who, female, served in the Air Force, served abroad for 8 years. That's 8 years of her life dedicated to serving our country. She was set to in healthcare logistics, so setting up hospitals and whatnot, not necessarily in combat,
Right.
but setting up hospitals and clinics. I have an aunt who was in Korea. I have another female cousin who actually served like in combat
Right.
during Operation Iraqi Freedom. I am, that angered me so much because it's also coming from someone who has never served themselves.
Right.
Additionally, if you don't support the drafting of women, you don't need to degrade other people who have served previously in order to make that point.
Right.
Like there was no need to state that in order to say, hey, just don't draft our daughters.
Right.
I don't support the draft at all, period, point blank. So, I mean, I kind of agree with him and don't draft anyone,
Right.
right? Don't force anyone to go into war.
Right. Unfortunately, at this point, I mean, knock on something. Hopefully that isn't a thing that we need to be using again anytime soon. But yeah, I just wanted to get your stance on that, considering there.
Piss me off.
Yeah. One other thing on Chip Roy, I put myself through watching his latest ad, and he tries to position himself kind of more as like a more hardcore Republican, and he called out 13 of his colleagues in the House for choosing to support the infrastructure bill that was put forth. I don't know where he's necessarily getting that. I mean, even President Trump's, if anything, in my opinion, and a lot of folks' opinions, taking the journalist hat off and the opinion hat on, we could have spent a lot more on infrastructure. And I think a lot of folks, including former President Trump, wanted to spend more money on infrastructure.
Yes.
I mean, the Biden plan ended up somewhere in like 1.5 or 1.9 trillion. Even Trump was trying to pass a $4 trillion infrastructure plan. What do you think about Chip Roy not wanting to spend money on infrastructure? And I guess where do you see where are you on that bill and all of that? Yeah.
Well, that's Chip's excuse for everything. Let me be very, very clear. 93% of Chip's votes to date are not in line with the Republican Party. 93% of his votes.
Right.
He votes no to just about anything and everything you can think of.
Right.
However, there is never a proposed solution. There is never proposed amendments.
Right.
And that's the thing. I explained to my grandmother, who's she's 92 years old. She only speaks Spanish, so she doesn't really understand politics all too well, right? And I was explaining to her Chip. And I was like, yeah, Grandma, so he's just someone that really, doesn't actually do anything. So we pay him $174,000 a year to go up and just complain.
Right.
Like that's all it is. He just goes up there to complain.
Right. I would imagine a lot of his constituents who voted for him probably could benefit from some infrastructure spending. I mean, I'm sure some of that money would have gone to rural hospitals and things like that.
Exactly.
Right.
And so a lot of these issues where he takes up, and it's not just on infrastructure. So for example, yes, he did vote against every iteration of any infrastructure bill that came up because of the amount of spending that was included.
Right.
When a lot of rural hospitals were closing in the midst of the pandemic in 2020, Chip still did not budge. Did not budge and say, you know what? My people, my constituents are dying. Let me get them some sort of health care, right? Did not agree to that. But it even extends beyond infrastructure in terms of even our veterans. He's someone who goes around touting that he champions veterans. However, every single bill, even when it comes to veterans who were exposed to burn pits, Gold Star families, and expanding VA benefits, he has voted against those things. Why? Because of the spending. And I'm like, so sir, do you just not, what are you here for, right?
Right.
Spending, you're getting paid to do this, sir.
Right.
You should just cut your job then. Just,
Right.
Dip out then if you're
Right.
so concerned about spending. And just, infrastructure wise, it's so important that we make those deeper investments, especially for rural America. So important.
Awesome. And then kind of one last question here, and then I'll give you a chance if you want to share anything else, you can feel free. The reason I asked this is I think this is going to make some news even outside of Texas going forward, as it's something that's going on this weekend. The Texas GOP convention is happening, and there were some interesting things. I was reading up on some of what's happened last night and this morning. Two major things to note about it. Number one, they advanced a resolution stating, quote, "We reject the certified results of the 2020 presidential election and hold that President Biden was not legitimately elected." This is at the Texas GOP convention. And then the other major thing of note was that they voted to not allow the only Republican LGBT group to even have a table at the event. I believe it's the Log Cabin Republicans. Were trying to have a table at the event. And the convention voted against even allowing them to have a table at the event, which, again, to my surprise, even President Trump came out and said that that was bad. Like, somebody from Trump's organization, the America First, whatever stuff he's talking about now, they came out and criticized that.
Yeah, because you're not doing yourself any favors.
Right.
That's an area to expand your base.
Right.
But,
I'm just curious your reaction on those sorts of things.
Homophobia runs deep, I guess, because it's also on their platform.
Right.
That being a part of the LGBTQ plus community is an abnormal way of life. I'm not surprised with anything that came out. I just really, really hope that the individuals who are running in these down ballot positions that are running for a state legislator are able to see beyond the red, right? And figure out, okay, let me discern which one of these folks, right? Which of my constituents are dark red versus light red. Because chances are those that are light red aren't going to exactly adhere or agree with what the platform is.
Right.
And so those are areas where we can make gains.
Right.
However, I'm not surprised with what came out of the GOP convention whatsoever.
Right, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I know we kind of covered all sorts of things there. If you want to share anything else, feel free, and also let people know where they can find out more about you.
Yes, so thank you so much for this. I'm Claudia Zapata, the Democratic nominee for U.S. Congress in Texas's 21st Congressional District. You can follow me on social media. That is at Poder con Claudia. That is Poder con Claudia for everyone else. And it's spelled exactly the way that it sounds.
We'll make sure to put a link in the description.
Okay, yes. Yep. I am launching two wonderful initiatives that take us back to the root of bringing people back into politics. We are launching this July. We're calling it ZRT, a riff off of CRT. And it's called the Zapata Response Team, in which we will be creating volunteer hubs throughout rural Texas that go door to door in low voter turnout areas and say, hey, do you need your fence fixed? Do you need your lawn mowed? Do you need help hauling something to the dump? Because there is not much, a lot of folks that live in rural Texas don't actually have trash, right? Regular trash pickup. And so we are offering and providing services just as good individuals. We are also launching our deep canvassing efforts, where we are going and looking for these light red individuals, not necessarily for their vote, but to establish a baseline of respect for one another. If you would love to support these at all, if you are watching this and you are in Austin, San Antonio, San Marcos, Kingsville, or not Kingsville. Well, if you're in Kingsville and you want to support this too. But if you are out in Kerrville as well, just anywhere throughout the district, we would love to have you join us. You can sign up on conclaudia.com to help support those causes. However, if you are not physically here and you still want to help, donations go a very long way. So I would very much appreciate that. You can also donate at conclaudia.com. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Claudia. I enjoyed speaking with you. And good luck in your race over the next few weeks and months.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.